Hello everyone, and welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. This is the Wake Up on the show. We have a possibility, just a possibility. The shutdown could end today. Two bills are on the Senate floor that Mitch McConnell has finally agreed to bring up for the vote. We're getting all those bills, all those possibilities, new hope, and still though, the effects of the shutdown and all that wear on. All right. But first, though, I'm going to have to yell, really, not yell, but I'm going to have to slightly scold some Democrats who are not really doing what I want them to do. So, yeah, and they're being very disturbing, to say the least. Setting the table, though, moderate on the Hill right now are moderate Democrats and Republican lawmakers who have become increasingly frustrated with the shutdown stalemate, and they're urging party leaders to at least restart a conversation about ending the longest shutdown in government history. A handful of House Democrats are starting to quietly step away and even outright abandon Speaker Nancy Pelosi's hard-line strategy of rejecting funding for Trump's immoral wall. Their message: we don't all represent San Francisco. So that is what they're saying here. They don't all kind of really want this wall. Leadership is rejecting speeches before they're being given. A Democratic Hill aide told the Post of Trump's Saturday afternoon speech proposing a way to end the impasse, dismissed by Pelosi before Trump had even delivered his remarks, saying, quote, "It just looks bad, and we're hearing from people in our district who are struggling." And here's the thing: the Democrats I think they've been relatively open to compromise, but they just don't want to give it a compromise. There's a difference between a compromise and just giving your opponent in the negotiations the whole entire shebang, and that's what really they want him to do here. And then Colin Peterson, just give Trump the money. He's a Democrat from Minnesota whose district Trump won by 30 points in 2016, said in an interview with Fargo, North Dakota-based radio station, KFGO, "I'd give him the whole thing and put strings on it so you can make sure he puts the wall where it needs to be. Why are we fighting over this? We're going to build that wall anyway at some time." No, we're not. That's just the way we're going to work. We're not going to build the wall. It's a stupid waste of money, and it's not to mention, it's also immoral and completely unnecessary. It's not going to do anything to make this immigration so-called crisis any better. No one's really suggested that it has, who has any kind of knowledge of basic statistics and understands what's going on at the border to a full degree. So, yeah. Just point to the statistical case. The problems with our border, they're almost all would not be stopped in any way by the wall. The wall doesn't stop the drugs. The wall doesn't stop the... you get the idea. All right. So Elaine Luria is also calling for a bipartisan solution in a letter to be sent to Nancy Pelosi, urging for an immediate reopening of the government, followed by debate in House committees regarding border security that would allow the DHS leadership to explain in detail how funds will be used and whether the proposed expenditures would have the reported results presented by the president. And here's the thing: they most likely wouldn't. Elaine Luria is not as crazy, but you can't just say we're going to compromise by just giving Trump the whole thing. Maybe they don't even want to compromise. They just want to lose. The Democrats, they just, apparently in this, some of these Democrats just want to lose. But again, I think this is a little bit of a bigger problem than, I think it's a little bit of a smaller problem that's being played to be right now in the media. So I don't think it's too much right now to worry about. But again, it makes a lot of sense, what Luria is saying, but none of what Colin Peterson is saying here. So it just doesn't look right. The big caveat here, though, is pressure is undoubtedly mounting on rank-and-file Democrats to end the shutdown, as the 800,000 furloughed workers are set to now miss a second paycheck this week. But Pelosi is the master of keeping her caucus united. It really is kind of an open question and a little bit more a closed question at this time. And she can be pretty good. She can be pretty good at that. And hopefully she does it for a really important issue, not just her election of the speakership. That would be nice. Sorry. What's going on right now? Wednesday. Hopefully this shutdown can end by even today, as right now 2 votes today are set to hit the Senate floor. The bills are as follows. The Senate leaders agreed to bring Trump's plan to the floor to provide $5.7 billion in border funding in exchange for the temporarily extending protections for Dreamers. Leaders are also planning to vote on a House-approved measure to reopen the government immediately until February 8th, while the border security negotiations continue. And that would be probably, in my opinion, the one that has the best chance of passing, because opening it till February 8th while negotiations over border security would continue would be incredibly helpful, I think, for a lot of people. There is, sadly enough, there is a chance that it very well could shut down again. Just given this, even if it is a brief reprieve, I think it would be very welcome. And I think I think there's a lot of people who, when they see that, I don't get why they didn't just pass a stopgap and continue the negotiations anyway, because it just seems like we're at a point where that would be so much more helpful. Because now that we fully experience now the country has fully experienced the depths and the horrors of a government shutdown, you really get the sense they would just not want to go back again. That's what makes sense here. So, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, change of strategy for him, according to the Post. Believing Pelosi was boxed in by her caucus and unable to negotiate with Trump, McConnell coordinated a new shutdown strategy with the president to reopen the government, according to people familiar with discussions. In doing so, he went back on his word that he would take up a bill to fund the government only if it had approval of both Trump and Democratic leaders. So he's going to do both. So that makes sense. But at this point, you're really going to need it. So both measures are expected to fall short of the 60 votes needed to pass, leaving little hope they represent the clear path out of this mess, according to the AP. So the tough thing is they just don't need a simple majority. They need 60 votes here to pass. So that's going to mean a strong majority. 60 votes. Yeah, that's going to be rough. But nonetheless, the show of votes are a welcome respite for more centrist lawmakers used to shining as deal makers during times of government dysfunction. So yeah, they're liking it here. They're liking having this situation open, at least, so they can do something here. The fact that there is floor time for anything is a move in the right direction, another Democratic Hill aide told the Post. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just quickly, though, before we move on, there has been some notable rule change at the House Oversight Committee. Now, Elijah Cummings, who is expected to lead, is going to have an easier time conducting interviews for the committee. So, yeah, and that's going to be good for him because he's going to need to interview a lot of people, both with Russia and everything else to do with Trump that's going on right now. Interestingly enough, Pelosi announced that some of the most high-profile freshmen will be serving on this key committee, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, and the little-known, but still awesome rep from Massachusetts, Ayanna Pressley. All right, yeah, they've all been great. I don't know if Ayanna Pressley is actually a little-known. All right, anyway, we are moving on now to, but before we do, I just want to say here, just remember, those two bills are coming on the floor. It's going to be tough to get them to pass, but they are coming on the floor, and that's something that you should definitely be watching as we head into today. All right. Right now with the people, it's going to be very tough. 60 votes is what they need to pass. Very, very tough. But still, over on the side of the people tracking the shutdown side effects at the moment, there are still reports from Washington Post and other news outlets that hundreds of IRS employees have received permission to skip work during the partial government shutdown due to financial hardship, and union leaders said Tuesday they expected absences to surge as part of a coordinated protest that could hamper the government's ability to process taxpayer refunds on time. So hopefully, again, we're just reminded every day of the possible consequences and the increasingly far-reaching aspects of the shutdown, which is just really kind of awful stuff. But our IRS employees across the country, some in coordinated protests, others out of financial necessity, won't be clocking in, according to Tony Reardon, president of the National Treasury Employees Union, said, and several other local union officials also explained the work action is widespread, including employees from Processing Center all the way to the Brookhaven campus on New York's Long Island. So, yeah, it's good to see that finally there's getting some sort of protest on, because as I said last week, this is probably the most acceptable time possible for a strike. It's hard to, when you're getting paid, when you're working without getting paid, that's probably the most likely time to have a strike. But still, it's really sad that to see these people who have been in it for so long, they have been working so hard for so long, without getting paid. It's sad to see that they're still nothing seems to get any better for them, because they really do need all the help they can get at the moment just to keep their financial lives afloat here, which is again very sad. Yeah, the FBI Agents Association also released a 72-page report Tuesday saying the shutdown is hampering the ability of agents to perform their duties and fund necessary operations investigations. So, yeah, we're getting to the really intelligence and keeping our country safe territory here. Plus, the USDA's meat inspectors have also begun calling in sick in numbers large enough to trigger an agency crackdown. The inspectors were told January 11th to bring a doctor's note, even if they were ill for a single day. 6 days later, after protests from unions leaders, agency officials were reverted to the existing policy, which calls for a doctor's note after 3 days. So, yeah, that's more like it. Union officials are very important to have in situations where, even if you're not doing a full-on strike, these workers, they still need to be protected, because there's a lot of times where they just don't want to come in, or they can't come in. And it's important for union officials to make sure that they got the workers' backs on this. It's going to be very critical for them, and they have a lot of important jobs for the remaining stretch of this shutdown, even if there's no strike being called. All right, so now we turn global, and Mike Pence out there expressing his unwavering support at the moment for Venezuelan people ahead of protests today against President Nicolas Maduro. In a video released on Tuesday, Pence calls Maduro a dictator with no legitimate claim to power who has never won a legitimate election. He stopped short of explicitly recognizing opposition leader Juan Guaido, the president of the National Assembly. Pence's strongly worded statements are the most explicit backing yet by the Trump administration as opposition leaders try to unseat Maduro. The New York Times' Edward Wong reports. The National Assembly has called, rightly, Mr. Maduro's rule illegitimate following a sham election last May. It has also called for protests on January 23rd because on that date, in 1958, the Venezuelan people toppled their country's military dictatorship, Pence wrote in an op-ed at the Wall Street Journal. Florida's members of Congress met with the White House to discuss the crisis for some reason. I don't know why Florida has to do with Venezuela. Maybe it's primarily Latin, but I don't know. Responding to Pence, though, Maduro fired back, saying he had ordered a complete and total and absolute revision of Venezuela's relationship with the United States. Who likes the president of Venezuela? He said. Mike Pence? No. All right, so yeah. Wednesday's protest will be a test for Guaido, a member of the hardline opposition party Voluntad Popular. He's called on Venezuelans to take to the streets to protest the government. If they heed his call, this would be the first mass mobilization in the country since a bloody crackdown against demonstrators left more than 100 people dead in clashes with security forces, according to the UN. All right. Finally, though, we are going to, this is a final here. We're going to turn to the courts right now, as a new conservative majority in the Supreme Court is leading to devastation for the patriots who have served this country in uniform, who just so happen to be transgender. The Supreme Court refused to stop the administration from implementing broad restrictions on LGBT troops serving in the military, while the issue wends its way through the lower courts. In a 5-4 decision, the High Court lifted the national injunctions on the policy, reversing an Obama administration rule that would have opened the military to transgender men and women, and instead barred those who identify with a gender different from the one assigned at birth and who are seeking to transition. The decision could be a harbinger for some of the court's conservative majority and how they will decide to rule. Chief Justice John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, and Brett Kavanaugh voted to allow restrictions on LGBT service members to be put in place. The liberal justices, Bader Ginsburg, Breyer, Sotomayor, opposed it. So that's in the 5-4 decision. That is how it broke down. All right. So no ban from the Pentagon. That's what they're saying at the moment. They've proposed the policy. It is critical the DoD be permitted to implement personnel policies that determines are necessary to ensure the most lethal and combative effective fighting force in the world. So again, that's a more interesting case. If you have the Pentagon saying that we want transgender people in the military, like